In the interest of respecting everybody's time, I'll go ahead and start our meeting since our board chair, our committee chair is not present yet. We will call the meeting to order at 1:31. And we'll start with a quick round of introductions. I am Jeff Herron. I am the manager of Lexington Fayette Urban County Government's Office of Homelessness Prevention and Intervention.
My name is Eric Evans. I'm housing advocate for Independence Place.
I'm Bruce Davis, member of the HPI COC board.
I'm Marissa Webb. I'm the Continuum of Care Coordinator within OPI.
I'm Christina Ellison, Director of Programs with New Beginnings Bluegrass.
Erica Dominguez, Director of Outreach Services for Lexington Restoration.
Naomi Cluett, Lexington Public Library.
Mark Baldwin, New Government Relations for Coalition for the Homeless and Homeless and Housing Coalition.
Billy Love, Life Stansdale.
Dale Jones. Diane Fleet, Greenhouse 17. Ava Cruz, I'm just a student at UK.
My name is George Eklund. I work for the Coalition for the Homeless in Louisville.
Adrian Bush, Homeless and Housing Coalition of Kentucky.
I'm Katie Matakis, Homeless and Housing Coalition of Kentucky.
Then we've had a couple folks join us, including the chair of this committee.
Yes, hello, I'm Bo Revelet, HPI board.
Jamie Cody, Bluegrass Care Navigator. Jackie Long, Mountain Health People Care Center.
And we have somebody else joining us, but I do want to state for everybody who has joined us late or has not gotten around to it, there is a sign-in sheet. Please be sure to sign in.
Janice, do you want to tell us who you are?
Janice James, on the HPI board.
And lots of our folks following in, we're doing introductions. Hate to put you on the spot as you walk in the door, but.
No, capacity.
Yeah.
Do you want to introduce yourselves?
Yeah. I'm Sammy. I work at Kentucky Refugee Ministries as a victim advocate.
I'm Christy. I also work at Kentucky Refugee Ministry as a victim advocate too.
Kitty Collins, Job Comprehensive Care.
And just to reiterate Marissa's message in case somebody didn't hear as they walked in, we do have a sign-in sheet circulating. Try to make sure you catch that, get your name on there so we can reflect that in the minutes and add you to our contact list if you have a desire. Bo, at this point, I'll hand it over to you. We can start with the next item.
Great, okay, so first is review of minutes from April. Are there any comments or changes? Can we get a motion to approve?
I move approval of the April 24 minutes.
And a second?
Okay.
All right, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Great, all right, minutes are approved. And next we've got the roundtable, so Adrian and George, take it away.
Okay.
All right. Okay, good. It came back. All right. Well, it is great to be with you all. I really should have checked with you to see how much time we have, given that you have other business to do during this meeting.
For us, we're a little bit light on the agenda today.
Okay.
I'll push you all first so that we can have you as the main attraction and also so you don't have to stick around when we're done if you don't want to.
Okay.
But you're welcome.
Okay, cool. All right. So, as I said, I'm Adrian Bush. I'm with the Homeless and Housing Coalition of Kentucky. I just realized this is a really smart screen, but like also you may be far away and you may be nearsighted like me and you may not be able to see. So just bear with us. We are the State Homeless and Housing Coalition, here to serve, the needs of Kentucky housing-wise. A few years ago, we started partnering formally with George's group, the Coalition for the Homeless, which is the Continuum of Care lead in Louisville. So it's structured a little bit differently. HHCK, we are a membership organization. we also host the oldest AmeriCorps program in the state and the only one that is housing focused. We also staff and convene the Kentucky Interagency Council on Homelessness. So George, is there anything you want to say about the Coalition for the Homeless in Louisville?
No, we're almost 40 years old. We're as old as I am. And really we are, as you know, the COC lead, but the other piece that we do is education advocacy. Same work that you all are doing every day is like going and educating lawmakers, but also the general public about the causes of homelessness, pushing back against any myths or bad information, but also like the solutions of like getting people into housing as quickly as possible. So.
Great. Okay, so I am going to present kind of an overview. We do have some new data on the housing shortage. I understand that local communities may do their own housing needs assessment, but we really wanted to share that the Kentucky Housing Corporation, the State Housing Finance Agency, has taken it upon themselves to work with Bowen National Research to develop a document that is living, that can be presented to lawmakers about what is the quantifiable shortage of housing in both the rental and the home ownership markets. I have put a big old red circle on the left-hand side of the graphic because this tells us that where we have the biggest gap in our housing needs across income spectrums is, to no one's surprise, our extremely low-income friends and neighbors in the rental market. Also in the home ownership too. But the difference between the rental and the home ownership, the first row and the second row, is that rental, it kind of goes the way we think it goes, normally based on prior research. The biggest gap is for the 0 to 30% AMI, the area median income, and then it like subsides. Home ownership is kind of all over the place, but the bottom line is we need units across the board. Locally, they have tried to quantify it at the county level, so I did pull the graphic for Fayette County with the current housing gap of being just over 22,000 units, which, again, these are really conservative numbers. The goal here is to try to get, like, it kind of bridge the gap between, like, completely conservative numbers that are not realistic versus more aspirational if everybody were exactly where they wanted to be, and also not make it so overwhelming that like nobody takes any action on it. Okay, so generally speaking, when we're talking about housing instability indicators, we talk about rent, right? It's a pretty big indicator. This shortage really drives up the rent across the board, and it results in a lot of bad outcomes. It results in over 5,000 Kentuckians being counted in the last point-in-time count. It results in people paying way too much for rent, being severely cost-burdened, having to pay over half their incomes. I realize I am not telling you anything you don't know, but we try to synthesize it so that it's all in one place. We also have out-of-reach data from the National Low-Income Housing Coalition that kind of helps people understand how much you have to be making or receiving in order to afford a place to live. So, snapshot of homelessness. I'm sure Jeff and Marissa have done a great job with the point-in-time count, the Lex count. But just so you have an idea of what's happening out in the rest of the state, turns out Louisville and Lexington are not solely driving homelessness by their bad housing policies. Turns out we have people experiencing homelessness across the state and in the balance of state. Also, we do appreciate the point-in-time count data for our ability to do some trend line analysis. And so you can see we have been making progress on solving homelessness at the macro level. 2021 is the lowest point. That's also because it was pretty much a sheltered-only count. But then ever since that point, we have gotten pretty much back to where we were in 2013, which is not great.
Can you tell me which colors are which?
I can try.
And I will, if Adrian's willing to share, I
Yeah.
will produce the slides to the group as a follow-up to the meeting.
Yes. So like the turquoise color, the half of the pie graph and the line, they all match up. That's the balance of state. The top, the like greenish is Louisville, and then the orangish is Lexington.
You didn't make us blue.
Oh my gosh.
I'm sure that's going to catch some
Microsoft
flack.
Excel, how dare you?
One thing to note about the methodology in Louisville is that after COVID, we changed from like a one-night count to a week-long count with all the outreach teams going out. And then we just take an extra step of making sure we're deduplicating efforts. So that's part of why you see like a big uptick in Louisville. People have always been there, it's just we were counting better.
Yeah. Okay, so moving on to legislative updates. We're going to start with the ugly first. House Bill 5, who has heard of it? Okay. So House Bill 5 does create a new crime of street camping, otherwise known as unsheltered homelessness. It will carry penalties of $250 more with subsequent incidences and up to 90 days in jail. And I think cities across the Commonwealth are really struggling with how to even deal with this piece of legislation. The thing to know here is that it was part of a coordinated campaign across many states. You can see the United States, and where Cicero has kind of embedded themselves into different states and where they are. So our job right now is to inform people that this has happened and also try to mitigate the harms that it will carry with it. I do want to zoom out for a second to the federal level, and not even to the Congress or the administration, but the Supreme Court. Not because I'm a constitutional lawyer, I am not, but because there is a case that goes directly to the heart of what is going on in House Bill 5, and asks the question of whether it's constitutional under the 8th Amendment for cities and states, for governments to fine and jail people experiencing unsheltered homelessness. So this case comes from the West Coast. Oral arguments were heard in April. You may notice, and you may realize, you may know that the Supreme Court has to issue all of its written opinions or its decisions by the end of June, and here we are on June 26th. We still do not have a decision. So now it could have been today, it was not today. It may be tomorrow, it may be Friday. So, but the bottom line is, regardless of what the Supreme Court says or doesn't say about punishing people under the Constitution, you know, making it constitutional, we know what the right thing to do is to solve homelessness, and that's what we need to be doing regardless. Okay, so back to the legislative session. There are folks in this room who can talk more about House Bill 18 than I can, but unfortunately I'm the one who is talking very loudly to you, so feel free to chime in. House Bill 18 is a preemption bill. It is law. There was an emergency clause on it because of folks in this room. You all were trying to get this ordinance passed in Lexington. You saw that Louisville had passed it, this fair housing ordinance. And then our state legislature stepped in and said, no, you can't do that, and nobody else can either. So that is unfortunate. We're gonna mitigate the impacts of that and monitor it and move forward. All right, budget implications. So what's in the budget for housing and homelessness? Given that everybody has such an interest in it now, you might be asking that question. Not $200 million, which is what advocates across the state asked for, but we do have $10 million. First of all, they kind of broke up the budget into what was called House Bill 1, what was called House Bill 6. House Bill 1 was like one-time money. House Bill 6 was more recurring state budget stuff, normal stuff, Medicaid, corrections, stuff like that. I would make the argument that a budget is for 2 years and therefore it's all one-time money, but I am not chair of the Appropriations and Revenue Committee. So, House Bill 1 contains a couple of things for housing. One is $10 million for the Rural Housing Trust Fund that was established in 2023 to deal with floods and tornadoes. It also goes to a housing project here in Lexington. About $20 million will go to a shelter/acute healthcare project in Louisville. I got real excited there for a minute because there was $500,000 for an initiative in Owsley County. It turns out that it is for them to build homes next to a golf course. Which is unfortunate because I was like, man, $500,000 in Owsley County, we could just end homelessness for once and all. But oh well. All right. There was nothing for the statewide Affordable Housing Trust Fund, unfortunately. And in the House Bill 6, the regular budget, nothing homeless or housing related. There is a budget implication in that we will have IDs at no cost for people experiencing homelessness. The state will bear the cost. We think it might be about $20,000. All right, so no cost birth certificates for people experiencing homelessness. This was House Bill 100. This is set to take effect, gosh, during the regular, July 15th?
I want to say it's mid-July.
Yeah, okay. It's the other one that has the delayed effective date. Okay, so you may remember a few years ago we were able to get birth certificates at no cost for youth experiencing homelessness. This expands it to anyone working with a HUD-funded provider, a non-HUD-funded provider, a McKinney-Vento liaison, a TRIO person at a college. So we're excited about that. No cost IDs. Every budget cycle, the legislature passes a revenue bill. It's like 250-page bill that has all the tax breaks and all the stuff in that. And in there was a provision to reduce the cost of IDs for people experiencing homelessness from, it had been $10, last year we got it down to $5. It will now be at no cost to providers for the people experiencing homelessness. This does have a delayed effective date, and it'll take a minute to get that going.
I have a quick question on birth certificates.
Sure.
I've been in touch with a local church about an out-of-state birth certificate that was needed, and they said they were no longer going to be able to pay for that because they were having issues with checks getting cashed or whatever that they were sending for those. So.
And it was out of state?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Might be for Kentucky.
Yeah.
Okay. That I just want to make sure because like our organization might be able to do that.
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
No, it's a good question. These provisions do apply to people who were born in Kentucky. So if you have someone who was born in Ohio, unfortunately, you're still going to have to, chalk up the $47.50 or whatever it is these days.
Prices vary per state.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there's a couple networks of people that are doing like national work on IDs and birth certificates. So like it's go call a provider in Missouri or in Ohio and help, lean on them to help navigate that.
Cool. I'll give you my business card if you want to put me in touch with that.
Yeah, okay.
That would be great. So one of the things, George has created like a survey for providers who are already or interested in providing these documents on behalf of people experiencing homelessness. Eventually, we'd like to try to map it out in Kentucky so that we can put it on the web and so people know where to go. So once we send out the slide deck to Jeff and he sends it out to you all, click on all the links. They all go to really great places.
So will that be like in the balance of state, the coordinated needs and those, that's my idea, include coordinated needs, they could be the ones that did that.
I would think they should as part of their role.
We
Definitely.
would do that in our
Yeah. We definitely do it at HHCK as the coordinated entry lead for every Bluegrass County outside of Fayette. So. All right. Housing supply plus maybe some other topics. So every year legislatively leadership decides like what kind of task forces they are going to create to try to study an issue further. And the one opportunity, there are lots of opportunities, but one of the opportunities here after this session is that everybody seems to agree that we have a housing problem. And by everybody, I mean elected officials. We already knew that, of course. But one of the things that they did after a resolution was filed and didn't quite make it through to the finish line was come back in May and establish some task forces. One is the Kentucky Housing Task Force. So it had its first meeting on Monday, and it is available on the KT website under archived legislative coverage if you want to watch it. And it will meet monthly through November. Next meeting will be July 29th, also at 1 p.m. in the Capitol Annex, but you can also stream it on either the YouTube channel or at the KT. Now, this was a super important meeting, so KT carried it, and I would advise you watch it on KT. They will make recommendations to be put in the record by November, and then ideally some of the legislators who sit on that committee will carry forward some legislation inspired by said recommendations. This past meeting was really great. We had Wendy Smith from Kentucky Housing Corporation kind of present on a lot of what is happening housing-wise in the state. Okay, so this is kind of a jumping off point. We have our current and future housing advocacy priorities, since again, everybody is like, oh, housing's the hot topic. These are some ideas that we've been kicking around that we've made progress on in green, and then some that we haven't made any progress on, but we hope to, and then things that we didn't really want to work on, but now we're going to, like decriminalizing homelessness. So with that, we want to brainstorm.
Yeah. So for me, like I believe that there's a thing called the policy stream, the streams theory of policy development. And you really need three things. You need to line up the problem, you need to line up possible solutions, and then you need to line up the political will. And that last piece is like the hardest part, because you got to figure out the power dynamics at play at the state and local levels. How can we get people to move to a yes? How can we get people to a neutral? And how do we make it somebody's priority? Because up in Frankfurt, in state and local government, like everybody's got their own priorities. You know, sometimes it's food, sometimes it's golf courses, sometimes it's whatever it's going to be. So I want to use you all as guinea pigs, because I'm going to do this meeting 3 times this week. And we just want to brainstorm ideas of things that need to be changed at all levels of our government. So I'm going to pass out Post-it notes, and I'm going to kind of send them around and just take a couple and answer these questions like, what are pressing needs that you have at your organization? What are emerging trends that you've identified that impact your clients? What are consistent barriers that you have to navigate with your clients? Like case manager X has to always like go to the mat because of this on somebody's record, or X, Y, and Z. So just take a couple of these Post-it notes and pass it around. Any and all ideas are welcome, and then we're just going to kind of brainstorm and hear what people have to say. What would help increase the supply of housing? What legal changes would help people keep people housed or move them into housing faster? And I'm going to set a timer on my watch for 5 minutes. Does anybody need Post-it?
Where do you want people to stick stuff, given that I forgot one of the props? Or do you want me to make something?
I think we just make it up and leave that wall.
Okay.
Everybody got some?
We can be in like Monopoly land where we all have infinite amount of money and
Unlimited amount of Post-its. George is very generous with the Post-its.
Ideally, yes, but if not, we will adapt. I should have brought another 3 little booklets up. For this purpose, also think about different layers of government. Is it a regulation? Is it a local issue? Is it a state issue? It can be a federal issue, but I don't have time. We all don't have time to navigate that. What's that? We're going to kind of just share it. About 1 more minute, and we'll hear what people had to share. Start finishing up that last thought.
Now you got a whole fan for this one.
Got your whole agenda laid
Take it over the
Wow, I'm excited.
I think we should have done it.
Lower that expectation.
Who is brave and wants to share kind of the first thing that came to mind?
Bad Dan.
This is not, whatever. One of the trends and one of the hard things that I'm finding is the insurmountable cost to move into a place. So application fees are now $100, $200. Your deposit, crazy, 2-3 month deposits. So all of that stuff, IDs, all that
The
stuff.
additional fees, administrative
Yeah,
fees.
anything application fees, move-in cost related? Oh, you did? Oh, yeah, okay. Yeah.
I don't know if this is moving costs as much as it is once they've moved in, having funds to help them like set up their house. That's
I count that.
Yeah.
Did you write that? Or is that
Yeah,
just-
but I have a whole one. I didn't write it on there.
All right. What are some other things that kind of came up?
I think this is probably going to be something that everyone will agree with, but we need state level investments in homelessness and housing to include support for shelter as an alternative to people being on the street, but also both affordable housing and homeless assistance programs for permanent housing.
So state level assistance funding, if they put in a grand total of $520,000 towards homelessness.
That is generous.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's closer to 200.
It's really short of the 10 million that we're getting for an affordable housing project, which is probably not going to touch our homeless population very much.
Right.
You get nothing.
And the expectation is like, we're supposed to fix all of the ills, and it's our job to fix homelessness, but they don't give us anything to do it, so, yeah. That's great. What else kind of came up for you?
Well, I'll add, one of the things that I find in my organization a lot is needing more disability or mainstream vouchers for folks who have disabilities that are over 62.
Okay.
The cutoff date with HUD for a disability voucher is 62. So anybody over 62 either has to go on Social Security, they don't qualify for a disability voucher, even with the ongoing disability.
Yeah.
They can be 61 and have that disability, and 62 they don't get a disability voucher.
Okay. Does anybody else experience that?
Yeah, I had someone the other day that didn't qualify for a mainstream voucher because of that. Of course, there's no mainstream vouchers in right now. It's the state.
Does anyone work in this building?
I don't think they have.
I want to erase this if this is okay. Does anybody have an issue?
I think
The guy who works here is on vacation, who's usually
I
out.
won't tell you.
Is there on the back, is it blank?
Hey,
Oh,
always that.
I love it.
green thinker.
You can tell I work in the government.
Flip it.
Mainstream voucheration.
There's just not enough of those. When we had an abundance of mainstream vouchers, I think that was a great solution for a lot.
That was during COVID, right?
And how did you describe those, the disability senior vouchers?
They're what we refer to as a mainstream voucher.
I think he's talking about the same.
Okay,
program.
Yeah.
It's not enough. Okay.
It's limited to households where they have households under 62 and there's a disability in the household.
Yeah.
It's a limbo time, right? That's 62 to 65.
Well, it's almost like they expect you at 62, just go on Social Security. Don't ask for a housing voucher. Just depend on your Social Security. Good luck with that.
What are some other things that came up?
I'm sorry?
We're still in
Yeah.
pressing needs.
What's that?
What category are we under, pressing needs or emerging?
I think it is anything. These were just kind of thought-provoking questions just to kind of help guide you all to get kind of more of what you're looking for.
I think more assistance, like funding for actual staffing. Because staffing is so hard right now that in the programs, the availability of the funds restricts how much you can really pay someone. So we're not competitive for the people who are really qualified to do great work.
So you're having a competitive issue where, I mean, in Louisville, and I'm sure it's similar.
And we're losing.
You can go work at Amazon for $17 an hour, and you can't pay somebody $12 to go manage a shelter in the middle.
I have
the same thing on a few post-its, but certainly accepting third-party payment. So I work in a domestic violence shelter. I have a shelter full of women with vouchers, but it's just slowing them down. Like they just can't find anybody to accept whatever voucher they're on. And then on a little bit on the ID thing, I think it'd be kind of nice if there was a universal application and background check. So the same apartment complexes would use the same things. You did it one time, but it was portable apartment place to apartment place. You don't have to do it for each individual place.
I love that idea. Like,
I thought it was really brilliant.
Would it be like the Common App for college?
Yes.
Like
Or
you do
grant
once-
writing. I mean, there's been a movement in philanthropy to try to get everybody on a comic. It's not successful, but like the theory is there.
Yeah. I don't know if people are making money by doing it individually, or if it's just, we just are so silent, we don't know.
The landlords are gonna hate you for taking away their income sources.
I think you had said that to me, and that never occurred to me. I just thought, oh, a lot of apartment complex just like this, but I think you said that. I'm always naive.
Because like I know like a lot of the administrative fees that are tacked on are solely just for the staff time that it takes to run a background check that takes 2 seconds.
It's very peaceful.
I mean, I heard a story. I mean, I agree with you, Paul. Like a guy, he's sleeping under the bridge, dropped like 600 out of his own pocket, paying for application fees. Everyone rejected him because he has a record, he's been evicted, like all those things came up. So, of course, he stayed homeless. He's still under the bridge. It got worse. So.
That's what I was going to say. Every person's had their past in general, past addictions, felonies, all those things just keep them, sense of homelessness.
On that note, we've had a lot of discussions locally about desiring eviction expungement, which we understand would take a state level change.
This is not housing, but it's something again we bump into as far as income, having a really difficult time statewide of judges issuing child support in domestic violence cases.
Sure.
So it is a huge barrier. Like people are becoming homeless when they're leaving abusive situations. And I don't know when this trend started. They used to issue child support all the time. They don't do it anymore. Always fact check me. I can say about 80% of our counties. It's not happening.
Well, in the smaller counties, like Eastern Kentucky, they set it at $60. You can pay with $60. Because that's the bare minimum without having to have proof of what you make.
Right, right.
We have trouble with documentation, so if people either don't have documentation or they've gotten lost or stolen. Sometimes we run into cases where in order to get that document back, they have to show another document which they also don't have, and then they can.
You're okay, right? Okay. So just documentation issues.
Yeah. Or then they might have to go through like getting a FOIA, which might take a few months, and going through a lawyer to get all their documents back. But that does a few months and that costs something usually.
That's not big, and that is his time, and then all the immigration attorneys are very overlooked and overworked. So I guess just getting proper documentation for certain immigrants is something difficult and trying to.
Yeah. And I've heard bits and pieces of that from like our allies in Louisville, and it's the same. Like, you don't die. Yeah. Just another barrier.
And you have to drive folks to the consulate lots of times. Like, is it Indianapolis? Maybe one like we've driven people to Chicago, Indianapolis.
Chicago or DC.
That's a yeah. So it's not. It's just an added barrier for folks. Getting IDs is hard enough for that.
I'll tell you something I think that's going to be a problem. I think they tried to fix it, and I think they might not have. It's that Inspire, the HUD Inspire.
That replaced HQS.
Yeah,
It is
HQS thing.
NSPIRE.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is going. They're already using it in the Prestonburg Housing Authority, and our units are failing Section 8 inspections because our electric dryers are not vented, they're vented out, I guess. Like literally nothing I can do about it. So there's a bunch of things like that I think can inspire there. It's going to cause a bunch of units to fail and landlords tell us too bad. Right. Where we already have trouble with.
Yeah, because it would not be reasonable to say, fix your ventilation system
Exactly.
to accept
That
this
we
voucher.
approved with public money 10 years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know that much about Inspire versus HQS, but I think it's been talked about in our case too.
It will have been, yeah.
Other problems that you're hearing about a lot, other ideas? Yes, ma'am.
I work at the library, and we often see people who aren't able to access communal shelter, and I think I see two categories. One is women or women, children, and then women or men who have been asked to leave a facility or because of behavioral or just because of a substance use disorder. That's something that occurs.
So lack of shelter options and low barrier shelters.
Yeah, in my office, especially for the establishment of a low barrier shelter.
All right, how is your all's pit count is like 850, 900?
So we would have been 825 this year.
How's your unsheltered?
The unsheltered increased this year to 82 persons, up from 38 the previous year. Part of that is we had a much higher level of volunteers to go out into the field. So part of it is we did a better job of counting them. But it also is directly tied back to some of the barriers that we have. For example, we lack presently a shelter that can accommodate couples that don't have minor children. And about 50% of those that were unsheltered were multi-person households, demonstrating there's a direct correlation between the options available and who's accessing.
And they're not going to flow.
Right.
Somebody came to the Lexington, like there aren't any like homeless camps around. I was like, they're there.
No, we work with camps every day.
I looked at your all's pit count. Our unsheltered is like 700.
And we do see that in the winter, we usually do have lower numbers, obviously like a lot of communities, just because we tend to, one, have people that are going to go to shelter who would not otherwise just due to the weather. But we also have made significant investments in temporary measures each year, which is part of my advocacy for establishing a permanent shelter, is we can offset the cost of those temporary measures significantly if we do a better job of addressing the situation here.
And we have permanent infrastructure.
Yeah, if we didn't have that temporary shelter this year, our unsheltered numbers probably would have
A lot higher, yeah.
really high.
Bo, you look like you were going to say something.
Yeah, this is kind of bigger picture, but it seems to me that the fundamental thing that I would want decision makers to understand is just that affordable housing can't be built on the private market. Housing that is affordable enough for the lowest income people cannot be built at scale without massive public subsidy. And like there just has to be a complete sea change in how policymakers at the state level, but also at the local level in every city, think about the housing market. And like there just has to be consistent investment of public subsidy. And I think that like until people understand that, like we're gonna continue to have to put people in shelters.
Building costs, the land acquisition costs, all of that right now is so astronomical. And it's disproportional to the available subsidies.
And then you throw in like zoning changes.
Yeah.
Well, now I'll throw another wrench in there because one of my other ones was more shelters that are ADA compliant or friendly due to physical disabilities, medical disabilities, some families who don't want to be separated by gender, and all of these things, Yeah, we have a lot of people with disabilities that it's a safety issue for a lot of shelters. They're just not capable of physically accommodating some people. So.
just to give George and Adrian, we'll probably need around about 15 minutes.
Okay.
Cool.
Yes. So this is helpful, and really like when I like start brainstorming, like I really think it's helpful to get like people that are proximate to the issue, just to throw like, as much at the wall and just to see what's going to take place. And you all are closer to the issue, so like it is. I would love like all the post-it notes that got written, just so that I can put it into like a big matrix. And this is not the only time we're having this conversation, so I'm having it tomorrow with our providers in Louisville, and then we're going to do it again in Louisville with another group. And then Adrian and I are going to go around the state, and I'm doing it in Paducah, we're going to do it in Northern Kentucky, in Bowling Green, in Moorhead. Just again, like, let's see what the lines are between like the urban and rural sectors, what's different types of shelters, and what's the commonality. So I'm going to skip like 2 other sections that we would have done if I was a little more prepared.
You were prepared. This is just, we did not have time to do a dress rehearsal, so unfortunately you're our dress rehearsal. But you guys are very well prepared.
But we are going to like think about like what is the impact of all these ideas? Like, is it going to help 5 people, or is it going to help 20 people, or 5,000? And then the feasibility. Are we looking at this being like a 5-year deal, a 10-year campaign? I think what Bo was saying is like that is a 15-year like culture shift, and it's true. Like, if the private market was going to fix very low-income housing, like segment of the continuum, it would have already happened. But the margins aren't there, and you can't cash flow the property without subsidy.
And 2 things we're presently working on that I'll share with you when we get there. We're wrapping up our affordable housing needs assessment locally, and then the same team is about to start our shelter feasibility study. So we'll definitely contribute those
Awesome.
to you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So all this is to say, like, it is going to help like the broader scheme for our like statewide work. But we also need like you all to engage in this process, because they are tired of listening to me to talk about IDs. They are really tired of it. I cannot go talk to somebody about IDs. Yeah, we fixed it. Why are you still here? I can't go talk about criminalization. They're done with me. Not really, but they're done with Adrian. They're done with big homeless in Frankfurt. This is like a visual that I talk about when we're talking about how do we engage folks and move them up this thing called like the engagement line. So like this is just explicit things that I think that you all can do in your person, you all can do in your agency capacity, just to help that conversation, like what Bo was saying, like changing that culture and that idea that homelessness is our job to fix, but it's really like our state's job, like our whole community's job to work on this. So easy things like sharing our action emails with your staff or your board to email their state elected officials, sharing our social media posts, calling the legislative hotline. Those are all relatively easy things that you can do. 5 minutes at your desk while you're stuck in traffic, you can make that call. There are other like harder things to do, like sending direct emails to your elected official, just typing it in manually. Don't go to like the form email, but sharing like what you're seeing in your shelter, just sharing the problem, sharing your ideas, your solutions. That's just a deeper level of engagement that's going to like hit higher on their radar.
And there are really handy tools that can help you identify who your elected officials are.
They're even in the slide deck.
So, there we go.
Yes.
The other thing that I would strongly encourage you all to do now is invite your folks to your spaces and talk about like all the successes that you're having. Because there's a lot of doom and gloom. They think like, oh, this problem's too big. Nobody's doing anything to fix it. But like we all know that there are micro successes that are happening each day, and they need to hear about that. So like we had a shelter in Louisville that invited 3 state lawmakers, and like we got an hour and a half with them, and they got to like see spaces and like answer questions, and just have like a deeper level of engagement. And that's part of like that culture change of it's retail politics. It's building those relationships up. And then if you have the time and the bandwidth and the capacity to come to Frankfurt and help in those spaces too. Like it is, you as a constituent have a whole lot more power than I do when you're engaging with people.
Hey, George.
Yes.
Can I just add something in there on that piece? I can't emphasize enough to getting the elected officials out to your shelter to meet and see your services or your program or whatever it is. But just as we've had so many conversations with them, I would just emphasize with them that we should just educate them that people aren't homeless always because of a choice they choose to or bad decisions. It's just there's this kind of this undertone of it's their fault and why are we supposed to do something about it? Nobody says that, but you just kind of get that message sometimes with some elected officials. And I'm not criticizing them, they just aren't aware.
No, I think it goes back to George's point about needing to understand the successes. I think sometimes they're only seeing the problem, not the solutions.
Right. Just show where the success stories and just to emphasize that, people don't just end up homeless by choice or they want to be, keep hearing that, they want to be outside. They don't. It's just their best option because they don't have the really good options.
Yeah. They're outside because they're choosing to be with their family. It's not that they're choosing to be outside.
Right. Yeah. So anyway, I just wanted to throw that in there just from our conversations, just that education piece of, trying to help elected officials understand how people get there, and it's oftentimes not their fault, but.
So that's the thing about sober livings. There are people there that are spending day after day to make their life better, to get themselves better.
Yeah. How hard they're working.
Yes, exactly. They don't see that at all.
And just underscore that the trend lines that we're seeing of homelessness increasing are not the result of any one individual, certainly not any one individual's choice. Those are clearly pointing to structural issues. And we can point to what those are. We would love to talk to legislators about them. And I would say, George, did we introduce ourselves?
I did.
Okay, sorry. I'm so sorry for being tardy. One of the lobbyists. But one of the legislators who came to visit in Louisville is now chairing the Housing Task Force and has that whole new world of insight as she's going to be leading others through this exercise in education and policy development. So please, please, please think about having someone
I think too that those trends that we're seeing statewide, nationally, don't speak to the failure of an individual area. Sometimes there is this argument that it's just Lexington or Louisville need to do more to address homelessness. We see it's a statewide issue, not a Lexington and Louisville issue.
Here's some just good best practices if you when you engage with your elected officials. Always level set, assume that you know nothing about anything. Build that relationship up. Like you are the person that they're going to see at the grocery store. You're the person that knows where they live. Not that that's threatening. But you have that commonality. You can talk about, Holbrook Drug. You can talk about like over the fuzzy duck, those kinds of things. Think about what's going to move both their mind and their heart. So like the heart-wrenching story is going to move somebody, but the data points might not. But if you can kind of weave those into a narrative, like Matthew Desmond, who wrote Evicted, does a really beautiful job of here's the heart-wrenching story of this family, and here's the macro level data that's out there, and connecting both those. Be disciplined, focus on what you're talking about. They're going to talk about, who knows, they're going to go in a buddy hole. Just trying to get them out of the buddy hole, keep them in the field. Always brainstorm what the counter argument's going to be. Like, what is the most common question that you're going to get asked? Like, we're working on this utility shutoff bill, and I know, they're always going to ask, is this going to be debt forgiveness? Just anticipate, the counter arguments for anybody. Send any kind of follow-ups, report any relevant details back to the lead organization that might be working on that, just to help inform their strategy as they're going through. We're on nonprofits. This sounds like lobbying. It is lobbying adjacent. There are kind of two things that protect, there are a couple things that protect me from doing this. Our budget, as the COC passed through, our budget is rather high. So my time will never exceed 10% of what our actual budget is. As a nonprofit, you're allowed to do advocacy and lobbying activities, but it cannot be a substantial amount of your mission or your time. The general rule is 10%. So if you think like, okay, I'm going to spend 1 hour with Representative Timoney, think about like, okay, my hourly rate is $30 an hour. Is that going to be 10% of my entire budget? No. There's also a whole metric of, like in my lobby, if you're doing a public comment, if you're responding to a request, if you're just talking generally about the issue and never talk about a bill, never ask for money, that is not lobbying. That is just public education. That is just building the relationship up. It is advocacy, but it's part of like just the broader like systems or the broader like communication strategy on this. Is there any questions about this? I know that this is like an area that people are very leery of dipping into. Okay.
I used to do this for a living.
Okay, so talk to Eric, that's what I'm hearing.
I do have another question about something else though, and that is, once you've gathered all your information, are you going to include this to the housing task force? That's, you know, I give it to Wendy to take back to the task force, because this is exactly what they need to hear from the state, what you guys are doing.
Yes, but it will probably not be like pictures of but like once we synthesize it. So we basically develop a policy agenda, or we update it every year. And so this will help inform our policy agenda so that we do present to lawmakers. We're trying to figure out if there are different formats that we can get information to the task force. George has already sent them some things. So it will get there, it may just not be a direct line.
Are you familiar with Justin Jeter of the state? He actually works with
Didn't you want me to meet with him? Only I was in DC?
Yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
yes.
Yeah, he works with a lot of the disability organizations like my own, the Center for Independent Living and Silk and all the rest of them. Because he's asked us to kind of be a part of the input for the task force.
Yeah, good.
So,
good.
Yeah.
No, he's on our list to circle back with.
Yeah, I've talked to him on a number of occasions.
Yeah.
I think they're going to have at least part of one of their meetings focused on folks with disabilities and barriers to housing.
yeah, yeah. He doesn't want to make that the main focus. I get that. There's a lot more to it than this.
Yeah, but it's an important part of it.
Yeah, but oh, it really is. Yeah, but you know, he's trying to give him the big picture, and I get that. So.
Are they going to invite, legislators going to invite providers?
You know, we had that question yesterday on a call we were on with some Eastern Kentucky folks. They really put this first meeting together pretty quickly based on schedules and stuff like that. So I anticipate that we'll be submitting names and topics topics first, and then names of folks who can testify. So I told folks yesterday on this Appalachian call, like, I wish that they would take everything I told them and did it just exactly the way. Because if they would just do that, then we would live in the world that Bo wants to live in, which is that housing is a human right, and we just accept that. Like, we just have a place for everybody to live. And the amount of public investment that costs, so be it. So, but we will do our best to influence this task force. I said on a meeting this morning where I will, we will get something out of this task force. We have worked too hard to get it, and there's too much at stake not to. So, okay, here are some links to engage in housing advocacy. So stay in touch with us at the Homeless and Housing Coalition Kentucky. You can become a member of our coalition. We have some members here in this room. That honestly gives us the ability to come out and meet with people and meet with lawmakers and do the work that like the federal government and other people don't want to pay for. You can sign up for Thrive monthly webinars. That gives you a good idea of what's happening in social safety net world. Some of you probably already do this, but in case you're not aware, this is just some work that we do with some consumer healthcare folks, the Kentucky Center for Economic Policy, Feeding Kentucky, that sort of thing. And we also have, of course, a housing update. We do have an advocacy day at the Capitol this past year.
was the best engagement that we have had. We did it in January, we're gonna do it again, I'm super excited. But you can come that day. We have calls to action, legislative alerts to call or email your lawmakers. That's the link to the legislative info and hotline that George referenced. You can leave a message. If you want to get a little bit more invested, you do a form email through HHCK's calls to actions. If you want to do more investment, you do a personal email to your lawmaker. Or even better, if you happen to go to church with somebody or hang out at pickleball court, you text or you call them. Legislator info is going to be on the next 2 slides. As George said, invite candidates. Well, we talked about electeds. We have some opportunities here in Fayette County for some candidates. You also have them in Jefferson County too, George. And scheduling a meeting in Frankfort. We're happy to help with either of those things. So, state senators covering Fayette County, there's your list. You've got a cracked county, so you have like 15 senators who cover your district. And those are the links. You can also find your legislator based on where you live. There's the list of state reps. There are even more. You can, the link is there. But as I mentioned, as you all know, because you're civically engaged, you've got a couple of elections that will definitely result in a new legislator for Senate District 17, House District 45, House District 76, and there might be more. Those were just the 3 that I could think of like yesterday as we were finalizing this. Senator West, who covers part of Fayette County, and Representative Burke, whose district is solely in Fayette County, are both on the Kentucky Housing Task Force. It would be great to reach out to them and say, hey, you're on this housing task force, come and see what we do.
Lindsay Burke is from our world. She
Yes.
participated in Central Kentucky Housing and Homeless Initiative meetings way back when I started this work.
Yes. So one of the good things about the House Bill 5 is that we were able to kind of protect funding that has a housing first orientation. Initially, that bill would have jeopardized like $70+ million in federal funding, probably more when we consider Medicaid and SAMHSA funding. But Representative Burke was definitely one of the people who got that. So this is us. These are upcoming dates to engage more. We are having a training on homeless IDs, potentially birth certificates.
Yeah,
both. Identifying documents, if you will. We'll be at the housing conference hosted by Kentucky Housing Corporation, and then we'll be having an annual meeting. And we haven't really done an annual meeting since before the pandemic, so I'm kind of excited about it.
Are you going to send out an email blast about that training?
Yes. Yes.
And we'll definitely share there are a list of the information.
Yeah, I think it would be really great for CFC folks.
Yeah, and our hope is to have vital statistics there and the transportation folks just to explain the process that they're putting in place and what the form is and how to access those IDs in your area. You can click that link in the slide and it'll add it to your calendar, but we will be like pushing that out.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you for I knew you all are so engaged, and so I was like, okay, we'll do Lexington first, and Jeff was so gracious to let us come. So thank you.
We really appreciate you bringing it to us.
Yeah.
All right. We'll go ahead and move along to new business. Most of these items will move pretty quickly. We do go a couple minutes over. I understand if folks need to leave. First, we'll bounce it to Marissa just for a quick update on the development of a new common assessment tool.
Yeah, so I know that we have talked a little bit about this in these meetings and talked a lot about this in our Data and Systems Integration Committee meetings, but we are very close to the implementation of a community-specific pre-screening assessment tool for our coordinated entry housing triage. We had our lived expertise meeting that occurred at the end of last month. At the end of May, and we had 27 folks who attended and were extremely engaged in the discussion, in how it will be implemented. And because of the success of that, we immediately then discussed with our victim service providers of what they may, any input that they may have, just to ensure that the common assessment tool, the tool that we want to use, that is Lexington specific, is trauma informed. We heard back from them last week, and it has been sent to Kentucky Fair Housing. That way they can take a look and review. I would really, really urge everyone to be in attendance of our next data and systems integration committee meeting, just because that's where we'll be taking a deeper dive into that and then hopefully voting that out of committee to the board, so then that way we can start implementation of that tool.
So we're hopeful for approximately a implementation date of 10/1, which will align with the HUD fiscal year. This gives us a little bit more time as we wait for that next committee meeting for us on our end to explore things like how to implement within HMIS, and then hopefully be ready to hit the ground running. Obviously things could go a little bit differently, but that's what we hope to do, and we really appreciate everyone's work throughout the process and developing that tool.
Yeah, thank you all.
Also, I was on the agenda to just mention National Homeless Persons Memorial Day. This is an extensive item. Just really wanted to get a sense of if we want to do that event again this year, and who might be interested in participating, so we can begin conversations about meeting. I know it's June, but it will definitely get here quicker than we anticipate, and so if we want to have some time to plan, we probably need to convene a committee soon. So first off, is there an interest in doing another event this year?
That was really nice last year. I'm not volunteering, so I'll be quiet, but it was really nice. It was really nice.
I think it was pretty well attended.
So is there anybody that knows that they would want to be included in communications towards scheduling a meeting? Anybody else? I'll also send that to the organizations and contacts that participated last year and invite them to come back. But I want to make sure that I solicited that here in this group in case there was somebody that wasn't a part last year. And that will bring us down to continuing business. Marissa had an update on lived experience engagement for us.
Yeah, so as I just stated, we had a pretty good turnout and folks were really involved. We see some of the same faces at these meetings, which is really great that folks are continued to want to remain involved. Our next meeting, we do not have a date for specifically, and part of that is because we wanted that next meeting, and we told folks our next meeting would be more so a discussion around funding, around the continuum of care NOFO dropping, what HUD's priorities are, a discussion kind of broadly of what that looks like, and then deeper discussions about funding decisions, prioritization. Unfortunately, because that NOFO has not yet dropped, it becomes a little difficult for us to plan accordingly, because if we had planned for the end of this month, NOFO still not dropped, we would have had a meeting that would have gone nowhere. So we collected folks' information, ways to contact them, reach out to them, and we plan on doing that once we have that timeline established. That way we can make sure that our lived experience engagement, those meetings with our folks with expertise, is nestled within that timeline, so that there is enough time to get feedback and then also implement such feedback as well. So once we have those dates, I will be sure to make sure the Continuum knows about them. That way folks can know about them as well.
Yeah. Why do you think there is such good attendance at this last one?
Why do I think what?
Why do you think there was such good attendance?
I don't know. I think
partly the knowledge of incentives is a little bit more known, and so that's one thing that I think has helped. And I think also just that we've been kind of making efforts for a little while now, so there's a little bit of word of mouth.
Yeah,
Naomi, I know, put up a notice at the library where we hosted the meeting, which was helpful. We had a couple of other providers, like Recovery Cafe had a staff member that came and helped facilitate some folks getting there. So just kind of building on the relationships with our partners, and some of them made a little bit of an extra effort to help.
Yeah, I did specifically reach out to a couple of, like Recovery Cafe was one, that I was like, hey, I know that you have really good engagement with some folks that otherwise do not engage with our other providers. This is happening, and because we're seeing a couple of the same faces now for several times, I think that maybe they clearly know that they received incentives last time. I personally am very passionate about people being paid for the work that they're doing, and having like an hour-long discussion about a common assessment tool, what it is, both like high level, this is how this tool will operate, and then very at the macro, like how does this question make you feel, and how do you think it would make others feel? This particular wording, I think is work, and so I would like to continue to ensure that folks receive compensation for that work.
Do we already good on money for the incentives?
Yeah, we'll have obviously plenty of money with the increase that we got to innovative and sustainable, and that's something that actually makes it a little bit easier moving forward. Where we had our funds rolled onto ARPA, we had a little bit more considerations of what could be done with federal grant dollars versus local dollars, so I think we'll have a little bit more flexibility in moving forward. But definitely we would still be open if there's other organizations that might be interested in helping to facilitate some of those activities. I think there might be even greater freedom and flexibility that could come from an organization having some of those funds through an agreement versus some of the things that, you know, if I'm within the city, I'm always going to have to follow city procurement policies. And so there's going to be still some limitations even if local dollars are more flexible.
And I just want to stress that point as well. That's something that internally our office has had a lot of vision for how compensation could look, but getting into those roadblocks. So if other organizations are interested, please let us know.
Like for example, I did not know in advance that Lexington is not a vendor that I'm approved to use my Pro card with. So I would have had to have submitted a check request in enough time to facilitate that. Just didn't build enough time because I clearly did not think that it met the criteria of prohibited vendors in our policies. All right. Questions for us about lived experience engagement? We have a couple of items related to program standards. One, we've done a lot of work in this area, and we now have written program standards for all program component types. So we definitely really want to thank everybody for their involvement, whether they were involved in one of those documents or all of those documents. It's been a great help in setting some baseline expectations. Last year we had started this process with establishing a review calendar to help us complete the documents that have not been formalized, but also to go back and make sure that we're at least annually reviewing the documents and making sure that we are still following our standards, if there's anything that might need to change, just making sure that there's essentially parity between our policies and our practice. So we did include a proposed calendar for continuing those reviews, kind of keeping the same general order and timeline. We would start in September with rapid rehousing, permanent supportive housing in November. We would take a break for January, knowing we have things like the point in time count and the housing inventory count. Resume in March with street outreach, and in May, revisit emergency shelter standards. We just wanted to make sure that we put this in front of the group so that the providers that would be involved have input. Does this review calendar work? We would be seeking to go ahead and do a vote to approve, but we definitely open it for discussion, concerns. On our end, the only thing that we anticipate may potentially change is we may have to revisit that September date depending on when the NOFO is dropped and what the COC competition timeline looks like, our office's capacity would obviously be limited during the time of that competition. But if there's no concerns about the proposed dates, is there a motion to approve?
I'll make a motion to approve the program standard review dates.
Thank you, Janice. Is there a second?
I'll second.
All right. All right. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? All right, that passes. And then we have a more specific update coming from Marissa about street outreach standards.
Thank you. So I just want to, as we talk about street outreach standards, I want to thank everybody who participated in our program standards calendar and then that follow-up survey I sent out at the end of just like a couple weeks ago. We're definitely taking that information into account for how we are planning for this next calendar of program standards. But as for street outreach, we have revisited this with our street outreach teams, with directors and managers of those programs. And we've made some changes, specifically strengthening some of our language around implementation for those with lived experience, peer support specialists. But one section within these standards that you will no longer see from last year is the specific criteria and standard around encampment, and that is because due to House Bill 5, LFUCG's legal team is reviewing our encampment policies and procedures, and we felt because we wanted our standards document to be a floor and not a ceiling, and because that encampment document may be edited and changed in the future, it probably would be best just for a removal of such language in there. We had anticipated how would this standard document look if we had just altered the language to be a little bit more vague. However, we found that a lot of that language was already existing within the document in other places. So I'm happy to take questions about the document and the program standards at this time.
An updated draft was in the meeting packet.
Because I'm not clear, it has nothing to do with standards, but does the House Bill 5 apply to private properties too, or just public property?
So House Bill 5 applies to both public and private property. And actually, to piggyback off of what Marissa said, I actually just at the start of this week received the updated draft of our encampment procedures. Did not receive it in enough time to bring it to this committee, so it will go directly to the board at the next board meeting. The reason I want to do that is to make sure it's approved prior to the effective date of House Bill 5. The stance that LFUCG's legal team has taken after consulting with Louisville and the Kentucky League of Cities, at present, we believe that the language in that bill allows us to continue operating our policies as they exist. However, just out of an abundance of caution and wanting to make sure that we don't trigger that clause of that bill where we're prohibiting enforcement, the time frames are going to be changed to language about a reasonable amount of time instead of a set number of days. Essentially, we just don't want that number of days to appear in a written document that could be construed as promoting or prohibiting the enforcement. And then there will be a clause about the fact that it does not prohibit a peace officer or a prosecuting attorney to enforce the law. We're going to focus instead on the aspect of service provision. And so it's going to be kind of a middle ground until we have a little bit more information about what this means in practice. So Louisville's doing a similar thing and updating their policies. Now some of their time frames are codified in ordinance, but a lot of what they're doing is the same as us, using some middle ground language so as not to draw extra attention that might hurt us not only in the area of homelessness, but potentially in other areas where we're seeking state support, and really just try to continue as much as possible to operate as we have been for the past several years. So we'll make sure that that draft is included in the board meeting packet, but just since we weren't able to bring it here, I would definitely encourage folks to take a look at that, make sure you're comfortable. If you have any questions or concerns, since our board meetings would operate a little bit differently, just make sure that you would be prepared to make public comment for issues on the agenda, so that we can discuss that, since normally once we get into the bulk of the meeting, it would just be board members who would be speaking.
I think I asked this before, and it was also news, we really didn't know, but do you have a sense how vigorous the police department and prosecutor's office are going to be looking for this, or like, do you know, like, do you have an idea?
So from police, they've consistently told me that, you know, for example, they don't anticipate that they're going to have the capacity to enforce this much in the same way that they don't have the capacity to enforce every instance of jaywalking.
Right.
Obviously, I know that there's going to be some other factors at play. I'm sure that they'll get citizens calling them, demanding or requesting some kind of a response, and then also we've been told that they're going to lean on officer discretion and trying to mitigate issues through another pathway other than finding people or arresting. So hopefully that is exactly what will happen. I don't think anybody knows exactly what we're going to be facing until we are officially in effect, but they have been very supportive of trying to continue as much as possible and operating the way that we have been.
I'm going to see how your jail's going to be able to afford housing those people, and then the medical.
Well, and that's some of the language in the bill that I think presently the legal teams are interpreting as allowing us to continue to operate, because there is language in there about service provision as diversion. There is language in there about not placing undue burden on resources. Essentially, because we would not be able to financially and in terms of capacity fully address the need, for example, by placing everybody in jail, it's an undue burden on that system that it can't sustain. Therefore, they interpret that we can continue to offer this as diversion.
Is there data that we can collect to document the impact of HB5 once it takes effect?
I mean, I think that we would have to really think about how that would be operationalized and how we would collect. We're not opposed to trying to help explore that, but we definitely have to take a deep dive into what data we would collect, how we would collect it.
You can, I think, with the jail's cooperation, get through jail tracker, like the number of people who are arrested on that.
So we'd be able to pretty easily probably get from police information regarding what the cost for the arrest would be. So I mean,
and you can get it from the prosecution office because they'll show up in court.
And I'll also mention that I've already also spoken with Angela Evans, the Fayette County attorney, who obviously served on our board previously, has served on our council. It's totally on our end of this, and would really like to try to make sure that it doesn't have more of a negative impact than it needs to.
Well, it also depends on what they're charged with, because I've already heard, even before it's even been in effect, there have been trespassing charges, so they may, make it sound like something else. So, because there are things on the book already, and that's what's kind of redundant about the bill itself. So it already happens.
We are asking for a vote on the updated street outreach standards. We can continue the conversation, but I want to make sure that we would try to accomplish that to the extent possible. Anybody have questions or concerns about the current draft? We went through several stages of review and revision with our outreach teams directly, but we want to make sure that our membership is comfortable.
Then we would just need a motion, because I don't hear any questions or concerns.
Would there be a motion to approve?
I'll make that motion.
Okay. Is there a second? And this is a full membership vote, so anybody can second.
Second.
Thanks, Bruce.
Any additional discussion? All those in favor? All those opposed? All right, and again, look for the updated standard operating procedures at the board meeting within the packet. Other thoughts around this subject before we go on to announcements? Are there any other issues or public sharing? Well then, as a reminder, our next meeting will take place on August 28th, right here at the Don Ball Campus Center. And unless anybody is opposed, we can consider ourselves adjourned.
If you did not sign the sign-in sheet, please do so. Thank you.